Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm David Blank.
And I'm Jim Esch.
This is a podcast about finding something in nothing.
Welcome, Dave. It's June 1st, and we're up for another podcast. So we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to start with like a news update and an accolade that my podcasting partner has received from Southern New Hampshire University. Dave was one of the recipients of the Excellence in Teaching Award for 2023. Congrats, Dave.
Thank you.
So Dave, along with another faculty member, Rebecca Sheffield, received this award. Tell me a little bit about this. How did this come about?
Every year, the school evaluates feedback that they get from students. I guess this year I had a couple of people who were really touched by whatever it is I do in the classroom, and they wrote very moving tributes to what I had done. Because they sent me a couple of them when they told me I was getting the award. It was quite an honor, really. It's student driven, and basically 2 people out of all of the adjunct pools get it each year.
I think that's thousands of
8,000 adjuncts. So
that's pretty impressive.
Well, it blew me away, honestly. Although, to be fair, and for all those adjuncts out there who work for SNHU, I did email a couple of recent classes through the announcements and said, hey, they're doing this. I mean, they get the emails too, but the students, but I think they throw them away. They don't look at them. So, but I made an announcement in a few of my more recent classes and said, they're doing this. If I made a difference for you, would you write something and send it to the administration through the feedback loop that they have? And a couple of people, to my surprise, wrote back and said, it's funny, but I just did that.
Yeah. In fact, they posted a couple of these quotes on the SNHU website. Do you mind if I read them?
No, please, go ahead.
You can react. So the first one goes like this. Dr. Blank is by far one of the best teachers I had at SNHU. He is extremely proactive in our education and goes above and beyond to make sure everyone understands what we need to do each week. And if there are any questions, he is always available to help. He has a sense of humor and is very personable, which makes it a lot easier to connect and approach him with any questions and even suggestions. He has definitely been an influence on the direction I want to move in with my education and career. Thank you, Dr. Blank.
It's nice to hear that, it really is.
Yeah, and it's impressive that you come across as humorous and personable because you're not doing this in any kind of like live Zoom chat situation. It's all asynchronous, correct?
95% of it, yeah.
Right.
Occasionally I'll get on the phone with somebody, but not usually, no.
This is, I think, an even more entertaining comment. Dr. Blank has been a breath of fresh air. He doesn't just post assignments and grade them. He interacts with us in a way that inspires creative thinking. He allows us to think outside of the box while still appreciating the usefulness of the box. Out of all the instructors I've had here at SNHU, he is the most deserving. Please consider him for this award.
I love that one. I love that one.
Think really outside cool. The box, but still appreciate the usefulness of the box.
Right. I got to remember that.
Words to live by. Like
one of them, yeah. Yeah. I'm still I'm very touched. And it was really something to be at graduation and meet some of the other faculty and deans. They're all down-to-earth people just like us. And it came with a nice little glass etched award and a check, which was very nice and appreciated. Nice. And they even adjusted it for taxes, which was really kind of cool, I thought. So, but, of course, being in New York, I'll end up paying more anyway. But but anyway, so, yeah, it was nice. So it was something else. Kind of leads into something else that we're going to talk about because when you find yourself in a position like that where you're like singled out of a very big group of people, many of whom are very talented, And I'm not just saying that because I'm in there too, but I've been there since 2015, and you see some of the same names, and other people just kind of they come in and then they go away, and so you get you're in a cohort of people. It's a very Zen kind of existence. You have to accept that, because that's what it is. And it leads me to a book that I've been reading. My wife is big into audiobooks. And so we have an Audible account with hundreds of titles on our shelf. And she picked out The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, who's a music producer who has worked with everybody and won tons of awards, and has had a really amazing career and life. And she said, I read something about this and I think I'm going to get it. So she picked it out, and I said, well, I'd like to listen to it too. So one of the things about Audible, when you have more than one person on your account, is that when you're both listening to the same book, sometimes even it asks you if you want to pick up where the other person was, and you say no, but it does it anyway. So we got through this book really fast, because I would listen to a piece, then she would listen to the next piece, and then I would listen. So it was like we were leapfrogging over each other. But the amazing thing was, and a really strong recommendation for this book, it didn't matter. It was because this is the kind of book that you can just pick up and open a page and read what's there. And it helps you. Yeah, I love that. And it's a book about the creative act of making music, or making any kind of art, and how to think about it. And so he has, it's a very Zen book, just goes through all these different little chapters. I mean, it's 400 pages, and there's got to be at least 50 chapters, maybe 60. And this one, it's interesting that this must be a good place in the book, because I just opened. All it says on this page is failure is the information you need to get where you're going. And if you think about it, I'm sure everybody's had an experience like that, where you fail and you eventually see why that happened and that it was a good thing. I can tell you, I got laid off or fired from 3 different jobs within 2 years, and ended up teaching online, and it's been the best thing ever. I never would have found myself into this career if I hadn't failed, whether because of me or because of the economy or whatever. It doesn't even matter.
If you don't fail, you haven't tried.
Well, that's true.
The worst failure is not even trying.
Yes.
Then you're like afraid to even make the attempt. You know you're not going to get anywhere if you don't try. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
As someone who's failed a lot too, I can totally relate. Yeah.
I think anybody who says that they don't is lying.
Right.
They have to be. So another quote that I wanted to give you, because this was one of the first ones that my wife and I looked at, and just one of those things where I opened it up, I read it, and she just smiled, and I smiled, and we both kind of knew, it made a lot of sense in that moment. And here it is: the universe never explains why. Things just are, and accepting that helps get you somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
So it's a really great book, and
I'll check it out. Stacy has she's also very much into Audible. Our wives have that in common, and I'm sure that she'll listen to this book.
Well,
maybe I'll listen.
I think you would both love it, and I'll tell you, so the cover has like a little target on it, and the back has got no dot in the middle, and every chapter is punctuated by a singing bell. And it's actually it's read by Rick Rubin. So I listened to it twice, and I'm in the process of reading it once. But it's the perfect book for somebody like me, because you can just pick it up, read a little bit, put it down, and then forget about it for a couple of days, and pick it up in a different spot, and it all makes sense.
This is a perfect segue. Like chills went up my spine when you mentioned that comment, because the book that I chose to talk about today is just that kind of book. It's called The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa.
No,
And this
please
was
do.
a Portuguese 20th century writer who lived in almost total obscurity and became like this famous writer like after his death. Do you mind if I just read the blurb on this? Like this is from the Amazon description. Fernando Pessoa was many writers in one. He attributed his prolific writings to a wide range of alternate selves, each of which had a distinct biography, ideology, and horoscope. When he died in 1935, Pessoa left behind a trunk filled with unfinished and unpublished writings, among which were the remarkable pages that make up his posthumous masterpiece, The Book of Disquiet, an astonishing work that, in George Steiner's words, gives to Lisbon the haunting spell of Joyce's Dublin or Kafka's Prague. Published for the first time some 50 years after his death, this unique collection of short, aphoristic paragraphs comprises the autobiography of Bernardo Soares, one of Pessoa's alternate selves, part intimate diary, part prose poetry, part descriptive narrative, captivatingly translated by Richard Zenith. The Book of Disquiet is one of the greatest works of the 20th century. So this is the book that I really was almost completely unfamiliar with. And then I got it at Barnes and Noble. I started reading it and I just immediately fell in love with it. I'm still reading it, but it's like this whole idea that this guy had different personas and he had this whole like world, like this personas like writing different things, and like these are like characters within this book. But it reads almost like little blog pieces, like each little chapter is very short.
It's very similar to Rick Rubin's book.
Right. And because like he just filled this, there was like over 3,000 pages in this trunk, and no one knew what order to put them in. So every edition of the book, like they have to invent an order for it. So, and they talk about in the introduction, like you really should just read it at random. Like you just pick up and go in any spot you want. There is no plot to the book. It's just like these observations, these things. It's like, it was like really well written too. I'm just like totally into this book. I'm like, oh, I can't believe how good it is.
What's the backstory behind, like, was it just discovered?
Yeah, I guess he had published like a few things during his lifetime, but he was just like this sort of, I don't know where he worked in Lisbon. It was just some sort of office job or something, some kind of pedestrian type of work. But like he just sort of wrote in obscurity, but I think people knew he was writing, but this was just sort of left in the trunk, and they discovered it, and they realized how good it was. And so it's all handwritten too, so a lot of it's like indecipherable. So like you'll be reading a
Wow.
passage and it'll be just like dot dot dot, like you don't know what comes next because they haven't deciphered it yet. It's hard to describe. You just have, and it's probably not the kind of book for everybody, but I was very taken with it.
That's really cool. Who was the author? It was a female author, lived in Massachusetts in the 1800s.
Emily Dickinson.
Yeah, she never published in her lifetime, right?
No, I thought of her too, because
Yeah.
she published either 10 or 12 poems in her
Oh,
lifetime, most of which I think were anonymous. And she wrote thousands of poems. So 10 out of 1,000 like is pretty obscure. But yeah, she's a world famous poet. We just finished a couple months ago. We watched this TV series on Apple TV called Dickinson, which is a recreation of her life, and then they sort of blend it with like kind of modern sensibility. So it's kind of like this weird like historic drama, but it's also like they'll break into like contemporary music and like slang and stuff, but it works. It's like kind of funny.
right.
Really good show. Like we just love that show, and it's all about her creative life. Like
I'll have to
and
check it out.
How's your meditation life going
It's
these
been
days?
good lately. I haven't been doing it every day, but I've been doing it more. And I think, starting to read the Rubin book has helped me because it kind of puts you in a little bit of a meditative mood as you apply what you've just read, to your own life because it's very applicable because we all create. A friend of mine just turned 50, and I sent him this book for his birthday. And from what I gather, he's liking it. Just to say, you're not done. Um,
Right.
because I think I don't know, I kind of breezed by 50. I didn't really think about it too much. But now that I'm staring down 60, I'm thinking maybe I should have thought a little bit more about it. But I didn't have to suffer either. So
I like to think of time as not linear, it's circular.
it's really kind of up to you if you decide. Some people, it's interesting. I mean, I've seen people in my life who have basically decided they were done, and it's kind of sad. And other people, like my mom, our super fan, who has celebrating a big birthday next week. She's so impressive. She goes day to day and doesn't give up. Even when adverse things have happened, she just doesn't give up, and it's really an inspiration to me, actually. And I'm not just saying that because you're listening, Mom, but it's good. I'm also saying because it's true. Yeah. So happy birthday to our super fan.
Yeah. Did you say mom had a letter
She
she wrote?
did. In May for our last podcast, she wrote, "I really enjoyed hearing Jim's story about his teacher. I often wonder how I affected my students over the years. Clearly, this man had a great impact."
What did your mom
And
teach?
she was early childhood education. Yeah, for a number of years.
That's cool.
So,
So my one little meditation update is I'm trying out a mantra.
okay.
Like usually I don't typically meditate with a mantra. I just sort of breathe and just try to be very zen or whatever. And that's fine. But I felt like I was getting into a little bit of a rut. And I watched this YouTube video with David Lynch,
Okay.
and this video has like 1.5 million views, so it's quite popular. And he does this like 15-minute introduction to transcendental meditation. He's really into that, and I think he funds that organization
Yeah.
probably. He's
Yep.
big into
Yep.
it, and in his David Lynch way, like it's got David Lynch, thumbprints all over this video. He he sort of maps out like how it all works, and he talks a lot about the mantra and everything. So I just looked up like, well, what are some mantras what are some common
Yep.
ones? And I picked one of those, and I've been playing
Did
with
you
it.
do it by age? Because that's how they usually select.
I didn't, but I should look into that.
Yeah, transcendental meditation there's lists online. When I learned, supposedly the guy who taught me consulted with the Sanskrit writings and thought about me, and it came up with my mantra. And then I looked it up in the list years later, and it was it was mine for the age that I was learning at.
Ah, okay. I'll explore that more. I'm sort of dating this mantra. I'm not sure we're going
As long as it
steady.
works for you, if it helps you to, like when I meditate, I start off with the mantra very briefly, and then I just kind of, I don't know if I transcend quickly or what, but I all of a sudden I'm somewhere else, and I kind of come in and out, but I never really have to go back to it very often because I enjoy my thoughts as they bubble out.
Yeah, I've only been doing it for a few days, so I'll come up next podcast. I'll give an
Okay, good.
update, let you know how it's going. But I think it's been refreshing. I'll put it that way. It's like been sort of
Okay.
recentering, and it's like it's been helpful.
We should put the
Yeah.
a link to that video in the liner notes.
Oh, the David Lynch video? Yeah, absolutely. Like anyone, even you don't even have to be like in the TM, like you'll get a lot out of that.
Right.
Like it's very it's very educational and
There's a
entertaining.
great video about TM that came out probably 10 years ago now, which was an interview with Rich Schneider, who is the president of Norwich University, who helped bring TM to Norwich, which is a military school. And so they were finding that students were doing better, and they were able to deal with stress better later on in combat situations, having learned TM. And it was for a number of years, it was a really big thing there. In fact, one of my instructors, I met there, and he taught my wife, and just a really amazing instructor. But he's connected with the David Lynch Foundation, and he actually learned directly from Maharishi, which is, it's kind of a cool connection. I'll have to put that in there too, because it's really, I think it was like a CBS Good Morning, it's very brief, one of those things, but
Yeah.
it gives it to you from a different viewpoint and how it can be useful. I'm glad that your practice is progressing and deepening, and I'm constantly amazed that you have done it by yourself. You didn't need a teacher, and you're kind of learning it the way that the ancient mystics brought it into being thousands of years ago. And I think, why not? Why not? Why can't you be connected like that?
Let's turn to music. Have you been doing any listening to any new things lately, or getting into different styles?
Well, I started listening to some 70s soul. Recently, I kind of happened upon the OJ's Love Train, and it brought me right back to my parents' house, where I had this clock radio that was like this little cream colored clock radio and I could hear it coming out of that single mono speaker back in the 70s when the song was on the radio. Ever since then, I just kind of I call it up on Spotify and I just let it go, and it creates its own playlist. And so I've been really getting into that, especially when I'm grading. That's so just generically 70s soul.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. OJ's I think of as Philly soul,
Yep.
right? And the funny thing is, like that, like you said, that was just on the radio, like growing up in the Philadelphia area. I know it was like national appeal too, but like I didn't think of it as Philly soul until much later. And I realized like all this cool 70s soul, so much of it was derived
Really.
from, Philadelphia International Records and Sigma Sound Studios
Oh
and
yeah, like
Gamble and
Daryl
Huff and
Hall, John Oates. I mean, my God,
yeah,
those
and then the
guys.
Blue Eyed Soul, the
Yeah,
Hall and Oates, they're a Philly product.
right.
And Elton John did Philadelphia Freedom. That was basically a homage to Philly soul. And it's like, oh yeah, this was really cool. I'm glad I grew up in this area and like that was on the airways, because it never leaves you. It's a part of you.
That's right. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of songs that are like that just because I heard them when I heard them, like Bowie's Golden Years. Like for me, that will always be tied to very like when my parents first moved us to Pennsylvania, and I heard that on one of the first things I heard on the radio, and I can bring myself right back to my adolescent bedroom in that when I hear that every time I hear that song, I'm right back there with the blue shag carpeting and like the summer that lasted forever, stuff like that. And it's amazing how memories work like that. And I think in a way, maybe that's tied into time being circular, kind of like I rewatched the last episode of The Good Place. I don't know if you watched the whole that. It's really good. It's a Netflix series. I don't know if it started on Netflix, but it's about the afterlife basically. And at the end, one of the main characters says, "I experience time as if it's all at the same time." and in a way, if you really pay attention to your memories, you can have, even though, for people who are gone, they're still kind of there,
Yeah.
and you with you. And I think maybe that's why in Judaism they say, may their memory be a blessing, because whenever you say their name, you're invoking their being.
You bring them back.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
even if you don't say their name, just thinking about them helps do that. And so along those lines, I have recently decided to resurrect my dad's guitar, which delaminated in a tragic event. When I discovered it, it was just like the guitar literally fell apart. The bridge popped off. It's a 1947 Framus guitar, or 48, maybe 48, but it's old. I didn't take care of it, and I probably should have kept it humidified. And so I brought it to one of the local guitar centers here and had the guy look at it, and he said, "Oh yeah, these are not very good guitars, but yeah, I can fix it for you." And gave me a price which I was like 3 times what I thought it was going to be, and because it's a lot more than just gluing the piece back on. Literally, the wood has to be rehumidified, which takes about a week to do, and then they have to structurally fix it, and then put the bridge back on, and to do it right, it's a big deal. But I recently decided that I'm going to do it because I want to hear that guitar again. Like, that's so much a piece of my life. I mean, I played it for 40 years. My dad had it before me. He'd started teaching himself to play, his finger oils are on that fretboard. And I thought, at first I was thinking, oh, I'll hang it up on a wall and it'll still be there and blah, blah, blah. No, I need to hear it. Even though it's costing a ridiculous amount of money to fix it. I said to my wife, this is what I want for my birthday.
That's awesome. That's great. I totally get that. Yeah. I mean, guitars have a soul.
Yeah.
And then your dad's soul is in that guitar too.
Yeah.
And like you heard him play it. And it'll be really, really neat to hear it again.
Yes. Yes. The funny thing was, though, that when I first took it, I walked away thinking, well, the guy said to me, it's a really kind of a cheap guitar. They're not very well made. He goes, this one's not that bad, but I would, if it were me, I'd probably just put the money into a new guitar, And when I went back, I reminded him of that, and he said, no, no, no. He goes, actually, this is like, I don't know if he was maybe trying to get me to not change my mind, but he said, no, I've seen a lot worse than this. He said, this will fix up nice. So I said, okay, great. So in a week or so, like maybe on the next podcast, I'll play a little from that guitar.
Think of the guitar Willie Nelson plays.
It wasn't that bad.
I think it's got like gashes in it.
Right.
That's his guitar, it always will be. Like, that's his sound.
He is somebody I would love to hear live.
I have a lot of respect for him. We were watching a really cool video interview. This is another, we have to put all kinds of links in the show description. Rick Beato had an incredible 3-hour interview with Daniel Lanois, the producer.
Really?
Oh my God, you got to watch this. Like, watch it in parts. But it's 3 hours of just intimate conversation with Daniel Lanois at Lanois' house in Los Angeles.
Wow. Does he talk about Brian Eno and the ambient?
He talks about Brian Eno and Peter Gabriel and U2 and Bob Dylan and all these people that he produced. And one of them was Willie Nelson. He did a Willie Nelson album, which I've got to check out. I haven't listened to it, but if you're into like the gear talk and like the inside producer talk, it's amazing. And he does a little walkthrough of his studio in his house, and I was just raptured by it. Like, it was really, really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd like to check it out. In fact, I think I sent you a podcast recently by Rick Rubin.
Yeah, what was that about? I haven't listened to it yet.
It's an interview. It's an interview with Roger McGuinn. And he talks about like all these interesting stories from the 60s and his relationship with Tom Petty. And like, just Rubin kind of uncovers some of like how Petty was like a humongous fan of I hope I'm getting this right, but Roger McGuinn said, I felt so pleased just to be part of what he was doing because he's such an amazing musician. And Rubin said, "Oh my God, he was like he idolized you, and he had no idea. McGuinn had no idea. It was just, but there was a lot of stuff like his relationship with Crosby and how the Byrds got together, and it's an amazing podcast. So there's another link. It's an episode of Tetragrammaton, which is Rick Rubin's podcast. And it was really just very captivating. Because I love 60s music, and I mean Roger McGuinn he's got a really big interest in folk music, obviously, because that's where he comes from, but he wants to make sure that it's preserved, because he noticed that it was starting, like you couldn't find it anywhere. People were just letting it go. And so he's got a whole library of music that he's recorded and he's maintained, like everything from sea shanties to old folk songs that nobody ever hears anymore. It's just a real important part of music history that almost could just go away, but he's made it his like a cause.
That is so cool.
So he talks about that on the podcast he did with Rick Rubin, which is like maybe 2 or 3 podcasts ago. Yeah, I highly recommend that.
A lot of leads to check out.
Yeah. So what else? Anything else happening for you?
Yeah, real quickly, I went to a library sale in Lancaster at the Park City Mall, and we met up with my sister and brother-in-law and had a nice lunch afterwards. It was like the last day of the library sale, so everything was half price. So I bought, I don't know, like 30 CDs.
Oh, nice.
And a lot of Mahler. Like there was a lot of Mahler in there. So the Mahler kick continues. So now I'm at the point where it's like, oh, I want to hear this conductor's version of Mahler's Fourth Symphony. Or
do you have a favorite?
I have to go through them all still, but there have been some really nice ones. I like to listen to them, and then I'll get online and I'll read the reviews and see what people say about it. And I'm sort of learning as I go on. And the more I listen, the more involved I get in the music, and I like learning these symphonies better.
Okay.
So, they're becoming like much more recognizable. So that's been a lot of fun. There was other stuff in there too. There was some jazz, like Chet Baker. That was a good compilation. A Laura Nyro compilation. People like Edie Gourmet, William Ackerman from the Windham Hill label.
Yeah.
There's lots of cool stuff, and it's basically $1 per CD, so you can't go wrong.
Yeah,
with it. Exactly. Right. So it's like, and some of these I won't keep. There was one weird one, a modern English album. Their one great song was
Melt With You.
Yeah. Well, this was like a re-recording of that. So they put out an album in the early 90s where they redid that song, and it's very close to the original, but it's not the Melt With You song. And then the rest of the album is very uneven. And it was like, okay, this one's not a keeper. I'm going to trade this one in for store credit. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Were they trying to be like the Grateful Dead and have a zillion outtakes and everybody loves them?
I don't know what the plan was, but anyway, it's fun. Every now and then I like to go to those library sales and treasure hunt. I'm not sure what the next show will be about, but we'll figure it out.
We always do.
And maybe we'll squeeze another one in this month. We'll see what happens.
Sure.
If anybody's interested and you have feedback or recommendations, like just email us at padularasa@gmail.com. And make sure you check the podcast description, because we're going to share a bunch of these links that we talked about.
And happy birthday, Mom.